Sometimes life throws you into situations you never expected. Picture this: a powerful man who owns half the county, driving up a dusty road to collect money from someone who can't pay. He's done this hundreds of times before. It's just business. But what happens when that someone turns out to be a young mother trying to keep her family together after losing everything? What happens when 5 small faces peek out from behind torn curtains, and the debt collector realizes he's about to destroy the only home these children have ever known? This is the story of how one man's routine business trip turned into something that would change 7 lives forever. It's about what happens when wealth meets desperation, when power faces innocence, and when a heart that's been hardened by years of business dealings suddenly remembers what it means to be human. What started as a simple debt collection became a journey that neither the wealthy rancher nor the struggling widow could have imagined. Sometimes the most unexpected encounters teach us the most about who we really are. Marcus Wellington adjusted his expensive watch as his black truck rolled down the gravel road. The dust kicked up behind him created a brown cloud that settled on the wild grass growing along the ditches. He had been driving for nearly an hour from his main ranch house, heading toward the smaller properties on the outer edges of his vast land holdings. Today was collection day, and Marcus had 3 stops to make. At 52 years old, Marcus owned more land than anyone else in the county. His great-grandfather had started with a small cattle operation, and each generation had added more acres, more buildings, more success. Marcus had inherited not just the land, but also the business sense that came with it. He knew how to make money, how to invest wisely, and most importantly, how to collect what was owed to him. The first 2 stops had gone exactly as expected. Old Pete Morrison had his rent money ready in a wrinkled envelope, counting out the bills twice before handing them over. The second tenant, a middle-aged farmer named Rodriguez, had paid 3 months at once, eager to stay ahead of his obligations. These were the kinds of interactions Marcus preferred: quick, efficient, professional. But the third stop was different. As Marcus pulled up to the small wooden house at the end of Maple Creek Road, something felt off. The property looked run down in a way that suggested real hardship rather than simple neglect. The front porch sagged slightly on one side, and several wooden boards had been replaced with mismatched pieces. A child's bicycle lay on its side in the yard, one wheel slowly spinning in the afternoon breeze. Marcus checked the paperwork on his clipboard. The tenant was Sarah Mitchell, a 30-year-old woman who had been renting the property for 2 years. Her husband had signed the original lease, but according to Marcus's records, David Mitchell had died in a car accident 8 months ago. Since then, Sarah had fallen behind on payments. She owed 4 months of rent, totaling $3,200. Marcus had dealt with widow situations before. They were always complicated, often emotional, but business was business. He had learned long ago that mixing personal feelings with financial obligations led to poor decisions. People needed to pay what they owed, regardless of their circumstances. If he made exceptions for one person, word would spread, and soon half his tenants would have sob stories and excuses. As he walked toward the front door, Marcus noticed more details about the property. Laundry hung on a line stretched between 2 trees, tiny clothes mixed in with adult items. A vegetable garden had been started near the side of the house, but it looked like it had been abandoned partway through the growing season. The windows were clean, though, and someone had recently swept the front steps. Before Marcus could knock, the door opened. A young woman with brown hair pulled back in a ponytail stood in the doorway. She was wearing jeans and a faded blue shirt, and there were dark circles under her eyes that suggested too many sleepless nights. This had to be Sarah Mitchell. "Mrs. Mitchell?" Marcus said, keeping his voice businesslike but not harsh. "I'm Marcus Wellington. I believe you know why I'm here." Sarah nodded, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. "Yes, sir. I've been expecting you." Her voice was soft but steady. "Please, would you mind if we talked out here on the porch? The children are inside doing their homework." Children. Plural. Marcus glanced at his paperwork again but didn't see any mention of how many children lived in the house. Not that it mattered for the business at hand, but he was curious. "Of course," he said, following Sarah to 2 plastic chairs that sat near the porch railing. As they sat down, Marcus could hear voices from inside the house. Someone was reading aloud, and another voice was asking questions about math problems. It sounded busy but organized, like a household where routines were important. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm sure you understand that you're significantly behind on your rent payments," Marcus began. "According to my records, you owe $3,200. That's 4 months of rent." Sarah looked down at her hands. "Yes, sir. I know exactly how much I owe." I've been keeping track. I'm afraid I need to ask for the full amount today, or we'll need to discuss other arrangements. Marcus had used this phrase hundreds of times. It was his polite way of beginning eviction proceedings. Mr. Wellington, I want to be completely honest with you, Sarah said, looking up to meet his eyes. I don't have the money. I don't have anywhere close to that amount. Marcus appreciated honesty, even when it wasn't what he wanted to hear. Can you tell me about your situation? What happened to put you so far behind? Sarah took a deep breath. When my husband David died, I thought I would be okay financially. He had a life insurance policy through his job at the lumber mill, but it turned out the policy had lapsed because the company had changed their benefits package, and David didn't realize he needed to sign new paperwork, so there was no payout. She paused, and Marcus could see her struggling to keep her composure. David had always handled all the bills and the finances. I had to learn everything from scratch while also dealing with 5 children who had just lost their father. 5 children. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, though he kept his expression neutral. That was a lot of responsibility for anyone, especially a young widow learning to navigate finances alone. I got a job at the diner in town, Sarah continued. It's only part-time because I need to be here when the kids get home from school, but it brings in some money. I've been using everything I earn to buy food and pay for utilities and school supplies. I kept thinking I would find a way to catch up on rent, but every month something else comes up. Last month, my youngest daughter got sick and needed medicine. The month before that, my oldest boy outgrew his shoes, and I couldn't send him to school barefoot. Marcus found himself listening more carefully than he usually did during these conversations. Most tenants who were behind on payments either made excuses or tried to negotiate payment plans they couldn't realistically keep. But Sarah was simply stating facts, and he could tell she had thought carefully about every dollar she spent.
What about family? Marcus asked.
Is there anyone who could help you? David's parents live in Florida, and they're not in a position to help financially. My own parents died when I was younger. I have a sister in California, but she has her own struggles. Sarah's voice remained steady, but Marcus could hear the exhaustion underneath. I've looked into government assistance programs, but most of them have waiting lists or requirements I don't meet because I do have some income from the diner. A crash came from inside the house, followed by children's voices calling out, "Sorry, Mama," and "It's okay, we got it." Sarah smiled for the first time since Marcus had arrived. They try so hard to help, she said. The older ones look after the younger ones, and they all pitch in with chores. They know we're having a hard time, but they never complain. Marcus found himself curious about these children he hadn't yet seen. How old are they? Emma is 12. She's the responsible one who helps me keep everyone organized. Jake is 10, and he's been trying to be the man of the house since his daddy died. The twins, Lucy and Lily, are 8, and they're always looking out for each other. And little Tommy is just 5. He still asks when daddy is coming home sometimes. The way Sarah talked about her children, Marcus could hear the love and pride in her voice despite their difficult circumstances. It reminded him of something, though he couldn't quite place what. Mrs. Mitchell, I need to ask you directly. If I can't collect this debt today, what do you propose we do? I can't simply forgive 4 months of rent. I have my own obligations and expenses. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus could see her thinking carefully about her answer. Finally, she said, I don't know, Mr. Wellington. I wish I had a solution to offer you, but I've been trying to figure this out for months, and I just don't see a way. I can't pay you money I don't have. Her honesty was striking. Most people in her situation would make promises they couldn't keep or try to buy more time with elaborate plans. But Sarah was acknowledging that she had no immediate solution, which put Marcus in a difficult position.
If you proceed with eviction, Sarah continued, I understand that's within your rights.
But I need to ask you for one favor. Could you give me 2 weeks to find somewhere for the children to go? I don't want them to watch their things get put out on the street. Something about the way she asked, not for herself but for her children, made Marcus pause. He had been in the business of managing properties and collecting debts for over 20 years, but he had never quite had a conversation like this one. From inside the house, a young voice called out, Mama, can we have a snack? We finished our math homework. Just a minute, sweetie, Sarah called back. Then she turned to Marcus. Would you like to meet them, the children? I know it doesn't change the business situation, but they're good kids, and they'd be polite to you. Marcus wasn't sure why, he nodded. But before he knew it, Sarah was opening the front door and calling the children to come outside. Within moments, 5 children emerged from the house, ranging from a tall, serious-looking girl to a small boy with untied shoelaces. Kids, This is Mr. Wellington, Sarah said. He owns the land where our house sits. The oldest girl, who must have been Emma, stepped forward first. Nice to meet you, sir, she said, offering her hand for a handshake. Her manner was surprisingly mature for a 12-year-old. The boy, Jake, followed his sister's lead, shaking hands and saying, "Thank you for letting us live here, Mr. Wellington." The sincerity in his voice caught Marcus off guard. The twins hung back slightly, staying close to their mother, but they offered shy smiles when Marcus nodded to them. Little Tommy hid behind Sarah's leg but peeked out to get a look at the visitor. "They're beautiful children," Marcus found himself saying. And he meant it. Despite their obviously worn clothes and the stress their family was under, all 5 children had an alertness and politeness that spoke well of their upbringing. "Thank you," Sarah said, and her voice carried a note of fierce pride. "They're the best thing David and I ever did together." As the children went back inside to continue their afternoon routines, Marcus realized that this situation was more complex than he had anticipated when he drove up to the house. He was looking at a family that was struggling but not broken, children who were being raised with values and care despite their financial hardship. Marcus had always prided himself on making clear-cut business decisions, but as he sat on the sagging porch of the little house on Maple Creek Road, he found himself uncertain about what his next move should be. The debt was real, and his business obligations were real, but so were the 5 young faces that had just greeted him with respect and hope. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said finally, "I need some time to think about this situation. I'm not making any decisions today." Sarah looked surprised. "What does that mean, exactly?" "It means I'm not starting eviction proceedings today. It means I need to go home and consider what options might exist that I haven't thought of yet." Marcus stood up from the plastic chair. "I'll be back within a week to discuss this further." As Marcus walked back to his truck, he could hear the sounds of family life resuming inside the house. Children's laughter, Sarah's voice answering questions, the ordinary noise of a home where people cared about each other. He had come to collect a debt, and somehow he was leaving with more questions than answers. During the drive back to his main ranch house, Marcus found his thoughts returning again and again to the conversation he had just had. He had handled hundreds of similar situations over the years, but something about Sarah Mitchell and her 5 children had gotten under his skin in a way he hadn't expected. By the time he pulled into his own driveway, Marcus realized that for the first time in his business career, he was going to have to decide what mattered more, the money he was owed, or the family that needed a place to call home. Marcus spent a restless night in his large, empty ranch house. The master bedroom felt particularly quiet after the sounds of family life he had witnessed at the Mitchell house. He found himself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, and thinking about 5 children doing homework around a kitchen table while their mother worked extra shifts at a diner to make ends meet. His own house was a testament to success. Custom built 15 years ago, it featured 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen, and a great room with windows overlooking his prize-winning cattle operation. But as Marcus wandered through the rooms early the next morning, he noticed how empty it all felt. The guest bedrooms were pristine because they rarely had guests. The formal dining room table was covered with business papers because he usually ate alone in the kitchen. Over breakfast, Marcus found himself remembering things he hadn't thought about in years. His own childhood had been comfortable but not wealthy. His father, Robert Wellington, had worked hard to build the family ranch into something profitable, but money had often been tight when Marcus was growing up. He remembered years when Christmas presents were practical items like warm coats and new boots rather than toys. He remembered his mother, Catherine, stretching every grocery dollar to feed their family of 5. Marcus had been the middle child, with an older sister named Patricia and a younger brother named Daniel. Patricia was now a teacher in Denver, married with 3 teenagers of her own. Daniel had become a doctor and lived in Phoenix with his wife and twin daughters. Both siblings lived comfortable lives, but neither had stayed in ranching. They visited once or twice a year, usually during holidays, but their lives had taken them far from the land where they had grown up. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus that he had built an empire, but had no family to share it with. He had been married once, to a woman named Jennifer who had loved the idea of being a wealthy rancher's wife but had grown tired of the isolation and hard work that came with rural life. Their divorce 8 years ago had been expensive but civil, and Jennifer had moved to Dallas to pursue a career in real estate. They had tried to have children during their marriage, but it hadn't worked out, and by the time they divorced, Marcus had convinced himself that he was better off focusing on business. Now, sitting in his expensive kitchen, drinking coffee from a mug that cost more than most people's weekly groceries, Marcus found himself thinking about Jake Mitchell's serious expression as he shook hands and thanked Marcus for letting his family live in the rental house. When was the last time anyone had thanked Marcus for anything beyond a business transaction? Marcus decided to drive into town to handle some errands, but he found himself taking the long route that passed by the elementary school. It was recess time, and children were playing on the playground. He wondered if any of the Mitchell children were among the kids he could see running and laughing in the distance. The thought made him curious about what their daily lives were like. At the bank, Marcus ran into Helen Rodriguez, the wife of one of his tenants. She worked as a teller and had always been friendly during his business visits. "Mr. Wellington," she said as she processed his deposit, "I heard you visited the Mitchell family yesterday. How are those children doing?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "You know the family?" "Oh, everyone in town knows Sarah and her kids." After David died, the whole community tried to help out. The church organized meal trains for the first few months, and several people offered to help with childcare. But Sarah is proud, you know? She doesn't like to take charity. She insists on working for everything her family gets. Helen lowered her voice slightly.
The kids are all good students, despite everything they've been through.
Emma Mitchell was on the honor roll last semester, and little Tommy is one of the most polite kindergartners his teacher has ever had. Jake plays baseball in the summer league, and the twins are in the school choir. Marcus filed this information away as he finished his banking business. It painted a picture of a family that was deeply connected to their community, not transients or troublemakers looking for a free ride. His next stop was the diner where Sarah worked. Marcus told himself he was just going there for lunch, but he knew he was really hoping to observe Sarah in her work environment. The Sunrise Diner was a local institution, the kind of place where farmers and ranchers gathered for coffee before dawn and where families came for Sunday breakfast after church. Marcus took a seat at the counter and ordered a burger and fries. Sarah was working the lunch shift, moving efficiently between tables, refilling coffee cups, and chatting briefly with customers who seemed to know her well. Marcus watched as she interacted with an elderly couple at a corner booth, listening patiently as the woman told a long story about her grandchildren, while Sarah cleared their table. When Sarah finally made it to Marcus's section of the counter, she looked surprised to see him. "Mr. Wellington, I wasn't expecting to see you here." "I was in town on business," Marcus said, which was technically true. "How are you today, Mrs. Mitchell?" "I'm well, thank you. Can I get you anything else with your meal?" Sarah's professional manner was perfect, but Marcus could see the question in her eyes.
Was he here as her landlord or as a customer?
"Actually, I was wondering if you might have a few minutes to talk after your shift ends. About our conversation yesterday." Sarah glanced around the diner. The lunch rush was winding down, and only a few tables were occupied. "I get off at 3 o'clock. The kids don't get home from school until 4, so I have some time then if you'd like." Marcus nodded. "I'll wait." For the next hour, Marcus nursed a cup of coffee and watched Sarah work. She was efficient and professional with every customer, but he noticed the way she interacted differently with different people. With the elderly customers, she was patient and warm. With the businessman who came in for quick lunches, she was fast and accurate. With the young mothers who brought their toddlers in for afternoon snacks, she was understanding when children got restless or made messes. Marcus also noticed that Sarah never sat down during her entire shift. Even during brief lulls between customers, she was wiping tables, refilling napkin dispensers, or helping the cook prepare for the dinner rush. This was clearly someone who understood hard work. At exactly 3 o'clock, Sarah hung up her apron and joined Marcus at his table near the window. She looked tired but alert, and Marcus found himself wondering how many hours she worked each week between the diner and taking care of 5 children at home. "Mr. Wellington, have you made a decision about the rental situation?" Sarah asked directly. Marcus appreciated her straightforward approach. "I've been thinking about it a lot, Mrs. Mitchell. I have to admit, your situation is more complicated than I initially realized." "Complicated how?" "Well, for one thing, I didn't expect to find such a well-organized family. I deal with a lot of tenants who are behind on rent, and usually there are other problems too. Property damage, neighbor complaints, that sort of thing. But when I spoke with people around town today, I heard nothing but good things about you and your children."
Sarah looked puzzled.
"You've been asking people about us?" "Not exactly asking. But in a small town, people volunteer information." Marcus smiled slightly. "I heard that Emma is an honor student, that Jake is polite and hardworking, that the twins are in the school choir, and that Tommy is a favorite among the kindergarten teachers." For the first time since Marcus had met her, Sarah looked emotional. "The kids have worked so hard to keep their grades up and stay involved in their activities, even after losing their dad. I'm proud of how they've handled everything." You should be proud, Marcus said, and he meant it. I'm also told that you're well respected here at the diner and that you've never missed a shift or shown up late. Work is work, Sarah said simply. If someone is depending on me to be here, then I need to be here. Marcus found himself impressed by her attitude. Mrs. Cullen, Mitchell, I want to ask you something, and I hope you'll be honest with me. If I were to give you more time to catch up on the rent, do you realistically think you could do it, or would I just be postponing the inevitable? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, clearly thinking carefully about her answer. Mr. Bubb. Wellington, I want to say yes, because I want to believe I can find a way to make it work. But if I'm being completely honest, I don't see how. Even if I picked up more hours here at the diner, I would need childcare for the younger kids, and that costs money. And even working more hours, it would take me months and months to save up $3,000 while still paying for current rent and all our other expenses. Again, Marcus found himself struck by Sarah's honesty. She could have made optimistic promises to buy herself more time, but instead she was being realistic about her limitations. What would you do if you had to leave the house? Marcus asked. I've been researching options, Sarah said. There's a family shelter about an hour from here that might take us temporarily. Or I could ask my sister in California if we could stay with her while I look for work out there. But that would mean pulling the kids out of school and away from the only community they've ever known. Neither option sounded appealing, and Marcus could see the weight of responsibility on Sarah's shoulders as she contemplated uprooting her children's lives. There's something else I want to ask you, Marcus said. Yesterday, when I met your children, they seemed remarkably well adjusted for kids who have been through such a difficult time. How do you manage that? Sarah's face softened. I learned from my own parents that children can handle almost anything if they feel secure in their family's love, and if they understand what's happening around them. I've been honest with them about our financial situation, but I've also made sure they know that we're going to stick together no matter what happens. She paused, looking out the diner window toward the direction of the school. I think David would be proud of how the kids have stepped up. Emma helps the younger ones with their homework every day. Jake has taken on extra chores without being asked. The twins look out for Tommy and make sure he doesn't feel scared or left out. They've all learned to be grateful for what we have instead of complaining about what we don't have. Marcus felt something shift in his chest as he listened to Sarah talk about her children. He was hearing about a kind of wealth that had nothing to do with money, a richness of family bonds, and values that couldn't be measured in bank accounts or property deeds. Mitchell, I have another question, and this one might sound strange, but I'm curious about what you and your family do for fun, given your budget constraints.
Sarah smiled for the first time during their conversation.
We've gotten creative about entertainment. Friday nights are game nights, where we play board games or card games around the kitchen table.
Saturday mornings, we go for walks around the neighborhood or to the park, and we have picnics when the weather is nice. The kids love to help me bake cookies on Sunday afternoons, and we read stories together before bedtime. She continued, in the summer, we have movie nights in the backyard, where we hang a sheet between two trees and use an old projector Jake found at a garage sale. And every month, we have what we call Adventure Day, where we explore somewhere new that doesn't cost money, like hiking trails or visiting the library for special programs. Marcus realized that Sarah was describing a family life that was richer in many ways than his own solitary existence. Despite having very little money, the Mitchell family had created traditions and shared experiences that bonded them together. It sounds like you've built something very special with your children, Marcus said. We've had to, Sarah replied. When you lose someone as important as David was to our family, you learn that the relationships you have with the people still in your life are precious. We can't afford to waste time on things that don't matter. As Marcus drove home from the diner that afternoon, he found himself thinking about Sarah's words. When was the last time he had spent time on something simply because it brought him joy rather than because it advanced his business interests? When was the last time he had felt connected to something larger than his own success? That evening, Marcus walked through his house again. But this time, he was seeing it through different eyes. The expensive furniture and elaborate decorations suddenly seemed less impressive and more lonely. The silence that he had always thought of as peaceful now felt empty. Marcus realized that his visit to collect a debt had forced him to confront questions about his own life that he had been avoiding for years. He had built financial security and business success, but he had never built the kind of family bonds that Sarah Mitchell was determined to preserve, even in the face of poverty. As he prepared for bed, Marcus found himself wondering what David Mitchell had been like. And what kind of man could inspire such loyalty and determination in his wife and children even after his death? He also found himself wondering what it would feel like to be part of a family where people looked out for each other the way the Mitchell children looked out for their younger siblings. For the second night in a row, Marcus had trouble falling asleep. But this time, it wasn't because he was worried about a business decision. It was because he was beginning to understand that the choice he needed to make about the Mitchell family's debt might end up being as much about his own future as it was about theirs. 3 days had passed since Marcus's conversation with Sarah at the diner, and he still hadn't reached a final decision about the debt situation. But something had changed in how he was thinking about the problem. Instead of focusing solely on the money he was owed, Marcus found himself considering what alternatives might exist that could benefit both parties. On Thursday morning, Marcus made an unexpected decision. Instead of handling his usual ranch business, he drove back to the Mitchell house on Maple Creek Road. This time, however, he wasn't coming as a debt collector. He was coming with curiosity about how this family functioned, and whether there might be ways he could learn from what they had built together. When Sarah answered the door, she looked surprised to see him again so soon. Mr. Wellington, I wasn't expecting you today. Is everything all right? Everything's fine, Mrs. Weston. Mitchell. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important, but I was wondering if I could ask you a favor. Sarah looked puzzled, but stepped out onto the porch. What kind of favor? Marcus realized how strange his request was going to sound, but he had decided to be honest about his growing interest in the Mitchell family's way of life. I was hoping you might let me observe how your family works together. I know that probably sounds odd, but I've been thinking about our conversations, and I'm curious about how you managed to keep 5 children organized and happy despite your difficult circumstances.
Sarah studied Marcus's face, clearly trying to understand his motivations. I'm not sure what you mean by observe.
I suppose I mean, I'd like to understand your daily routines, how you handle challenges, how you make decisions as a family.
I realize this is an unusual request, especially given our business relationship. After a moment's consideration, Sarah said, "The children get home from school in about an hour. If you really want to see how we handle our afternoon routine, you're welcome to stay. But I should warn you, it can get pretty chaotic around here." Marcus agreed, and Sarah invited him to sit on the porch while she finished some household tasks. As he waited, Marcus noticed details about the property that he had missed during his previous visits. The vegetable garden that had looked abandoned was actually being carefully tended in sections, with different children apparently responsible for different areas. A rope swing hung from an old oak tree in the backyard, and someone had built a small fort out of scrap wood near the edge of the property. When the school bus arrived, Marcus watched as 5 children tumbled out and raced toward the house. Their routine was clearly well established. Emma, the 12-year-old, immediately gathered everyone's backpacks and organized them on the porch. Jake headed straight to the back of the house to check on a rabbit hutch that Marcus hadn't noticed before. The twins disappeared inside, and within minutes, Marcus could hear them discussing snack preparations. Little Tommy ran to his mother for a hug before joining his siblings. "Mama," Emma called, "Jake says Butterscotch had her babies sometime today. There are 4 of them, and they're all moving around and seem healthy." "That's wonderful news," Sarah said. "Make sure you kids wash your hands before you handle them, and don't take them away from their mama just yet." Marcus was intrigued. "You raise rabbits?"
We started the rabbit project 6 months ago, Sarah explained.
Jake wanted to find a way to help with our finances, and he read about raising rabbits for meat and to sell to other families. It's been a good learning experience for all the kids. Jake approached the porch, grinning with excitement. "Mr. Few, Wellington, would you like to see the babies? They're really tiny and cute." Marcus found himself saying yes, and soon he was following Jake to a well-built hutch behind the house. The young boy clearly knew a lot about rabbit care, explaining the feeding schedules, the breeding timeline, and the potential income from selling rabbits to neighbors. Marcus was impressed by Jake's knowledge and his mature approach to the family business venture. "How much money do you think you can make from this operation?" Marcus asked. "Well, if we keep 2 of the female babies and sell the others, plus sell some of their babies when they grow up, we could probably make about $60 a month," Jake said, clearly having calculated this carefully.
It's not huge money, but it helps with groceries, and it teaches us about responsibility.
Marcus realized that this 10-year-old boy was running a small business operation with more planning and attention to detail than many adults he knew. Back at the house, the afternoon routine continued with impressive organization. Emma had set up a homework station at the kitchen table, with different areas designated for different children based on their grade levels and needs. The twins were working together on a science project about butterflies, sharing materials and ideas. Tommy was practicing writing his letters with colored pencils, and Jake split his time between his own math homework and helping his little brother sound out words. Sarah moved between all of these activities, checking progress, answering questions, and providing encouragement, while also starting dinner preparations. Marcus noticed that every child had specific chores that they performed without being reminded. Backpacks were emptied and organized, lunchboxes were cleaned and refilled for the next day, and everyone contributed to keeping the common areas tidy. "How did you develop these routines?" Marcus asked Sarah during a brief, quiet moment. "Necessity mainly," Sarah said with a smile. "With 5 kids and a full-time job, I had to create systems that worked when I wasn't here to supervise every detail. The kids know what's expected of them, and they know that we all depend on each other to keep the household running smoothly." What struck Marcus most was the way the children interacted with each other. There was typical sibling teasing and occasional disagreements, but there was also a level of cooperation and mutual support that seemed remarkable for their ages. When Tommy struggled with a difficult letter, Lucy automatically moved to help him. When Emma needed someone to quiz her on spelling words, Jake put aside his own homework to assist. When one of the twins spilled juice on a science project, the other twin immediately offered to help recreate the damaged portion. During dinner preparation, Marcus was invited to stay and eat with the family. The meal was simple but well prepared: vegetable soup made with ingredients from their garden, fresh bread, and salad. What made the meal special was the conversation. Each child shared something about their day, and Sarah asked thoughtful questions that showed she was really listening to their answers. Marcus found himself thinking about his own solitary meals, usually eaten while reading business documents or watching news programs. When was the last time he had shared a meal with people who were genuinely interested in his thoughts and experiences? "Mr. Wellington," Emma said during dinner, "Mama told us that you own lots of land around here. Do you have horses? I've always wanted to learn about horses." "I do have horses," Marcus said. "I raise quarter horses for working cattle and for riding. Would you like to see them sometime?" The enthusiasm around the table was immediate and infectious. All 5 children started talking at once about horses they had seen in movies, books they had read about horses, and dreams of learning to ride.
Sarah looked pleased, but also slightly concerned.
"That's very kind of you to offer, Mr. Wellington, but I wouldn't want the children to be a bother." "It wouldn't be a bother at all," Marcus said, and he realized he meant it. "In fact, I think it would be enjoyable to have some young people around the ranch who are excited about horses." After dinner, Marcus helped with cleanup, which was another well-organized family routine. Children cleared and wiped the table, loaded the dishwasher, and put away leftovers. The kitchen was spotless within 15 minutes, and then the family gathered in the living room for what Sarah called evening time. Evening time involved reading together, working on individual projects, and sometimes playing quiet games. That night, Sarah was reading aloud from a chapter book about a family that traveled across the country in a covered wagon, and all 5 children listened attentively, asking questions about life in the 1800s and making connections to their own experiences. As Marcus prepared to leave, little Tommy ran up to him with a picture he had drawn during evening time. "This is for you, Mr. Wellington. It's a picture of you visiting our house." The drawing showed a stick-figure man in a cowboy hat standing next to a house with 5 smaller figures waving from the front porch. At the bottom, Tommy had written, "Thank you," in careful kindergarten handwriting. Marcus felt something catch in his throat as he accepted the drawing. "Thank you, Tommy. This is very special." Driving home that evening, Marcus realized that his afternoon with the Mitchell family had given him a glimpse of something he hadn't experienced since his own childhood: the sense of belonging to a group of people who genuinely cared about each other's well-being. The financial debt that had brought him to the Mitchell house now seemed like a secondary concern compared to the larger questions about family, community, and what truly mattered in life. Over the next few days, Marcus found himself thinking more and more about Emma's enthusiasm for horses and Jake's entrepreneurial spirit with the Rabbit Project. He thought about the twins' collaboration on their science project and Tommy's generous gesture with the drawing. Most of all, he thought about Sarah's quiet strength and the way she had created stability and love for her children, despite facing enormous challenges. By Saturday morning, Marcus had made a decision that surprised even him. Instead of pursuing rent collection or eviction proceedings, he was going to make a proposal to the Mitchell family that would address their housing situation while also addressing his own growing awareness of what was missing in his life. Marcus drove to the Mitchell house with a plan that he hoped would benefit everyone involved, though he wasn't entirely sure how Sarah would respond to his unconventional idea. He found the family working together in their vegetable garden, with each child responsible for weeding and watering specific sections. "Mrs. Mitchell," Marcus said after greeting everyone, "I'd like to discuss a possible solution to our rental situation. But this is a conversation that involves the whole family, so I'd appreciate it if we could all sit down together." Sarah looked curious but agreed, and soon the entire Mitchell family was gathered on the front porch, with Marcus facing them from one of the plastic chairs. "I've been thinking about your situation for the past week," Marcus began, "and I've realized that the traditional landlord-tenant relationship isn't working for either of us. You can't afford the rent, and I can't afford to have properties that don't generate income." The children looked worried, but Marcus continued quickly. "However, I think there might be a solution that could work better for everyone. What if, instead of paying rent, your family came to work on my main ranch property? I need help with daily operations, and you need housing and income." Sarah looked stunned. "What kind of work are you talking about?" Marcus had thought about this carefully. "I need someone to manage the household operations at the main ranch house, including meal planning, cleaning, and general organization. I also need help with the horses, including feeding, grooming, and basic stable management. And I have administrative work that could be done by someone responsible and detail-oriented." He looked around at the children. There would be opportunities for the kids to learn about ranch operations, horse care, and agricultural projects. Jake could expand his rabbit operation if he wanted to. Emma could learn about horses like she mentioned. The younger children would have space to play and explore safely. Sarah was clearly processing this unexpected proposal. Where would we live? There's a large guest house on the property that's been sitting empty for years. It has 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a full kitchen, and a living area. It would be yours to use as your family home. Marcus could see the interest in Sarah's eyes, but also caution. What about the children's schooling? And my job at the diner? The ranch is only about 15 minutes from town, so the kids could continue at their same schools. As for the diner job, the position I'm offering would pay enough that you wouldn't need to work anywhere else, and the hours would be more flexible so you could be available for the children when they need you. Emma spoke up first. "Does this mean we could really learn about horses?" "It means you could learn about horses, cattle, farming, and ranch management," Marcus said. "It would be a hands-on education in addition to your regular schooling." Jake asked, "Could I bring my rabbits?" "Not only could you bring your rabbits, but you could expand the operation if you want to. There's plenty of space, and I'd be interested in learning about your business model." For the next hour, Marcus answered questions about the living arrangements, work responsibilities, and daily routines. Sarah asked practical questions about utilities, transportation, and household management. The children asked excited questions about animals, outdoor activities, and their new home. Finally, Sarah asked the most important question. "Mr. Wellington, why are you offering this? It seems like you'd be doing much more for us than we'd be doing for you." Marcus had known this question was coming, and he had decided to be completely honest in his answer. "Mrs. Mitchell, this past week has taught me something important about my own life. I've spent years building financial success, but I've never built the kind of family relationships that you have with your children. I live alone in a big house, and I'm beginning to realize that success without people to share it with feels pretty empty." He paused, looking around at the 5 children who were listening intently. "I think your family could help me learn about things that are more valuable than business profits, and in return, I can provide you with stability and opportunities that might help your children build better futures." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus could see her considering all the implications of his proposal. Finally, she said, "Could we have some time to talk about this as a family? This is a big decision, and I want to make sure the children are comfortable with such a significant change." Marcus nodded. "Of course. Take all the time you need. But I want you to know that this offer comes with no pressure and no strings attached. If you decide you prefer to stay here and work out a traditional payment plan, we can discuss that too." As Marcus drove away from the Mitchell house that afternoon, he reflected on how much his priorities had shifted in just 1 week. He had come to collect a debt and had ended up proposing a partnership that could reshape both his life and the lives of the Mitchell family. For the first time in years, Marcus felt like he was making a decision based on something more meaningful than financial calculations. Sarah spent 3 days discussing Marcus's proposal with her children. The conversations happened during their regular family time, around the dinner table, and in quiet moments before bedtime. She wanted to make sure each child understood what the change would mean, and felt comfortable expressing their hopes and concerns. Emma was immediately enthusiastic about the opportunity to learn about horses and ranch operations. "Mama, this could be like getting to live in one of those books about kids who grow up on farms and have adventures every day," she said. But she also asked practical questions about whether they would have privacy as a family and whether Marcus would try to control how they lived their lives. Jake was excited about expanding his rabbit operation and learning about cattle ranching. He had already started a notebook full of questions he wanted to ask Marcus about animal husbandry, feed costs, and breeding programs. However, he was concerned about whether moving to the ranch would mean giving up his friendships with classmates who lived in town. The twins, Lucy and Lily, were thrilled by the idea of having more space to explore and play. They had been practicing good behavior all week, convinced that they needed to prove they would be responsible enough for ranch life. Their main worry was whether they would be able to continue in the school choir, which met after classes twice a week. Little Tommy was mainly excited about the possibility of seeing horses every day, but he had nightmares 2 nights in a row about leaving the only home he could remember. Sarah realized that for Tommy, moving felt like another big loss, similar to losing his father. Sarah's own feelings were complicated. The practical advantages of Marcus's offer were clear. The family would have better housing, financial stability, and opportunities for the children that she could never provide on her own. Marcus seemed genuine in his desire to create a mutually beneficial arrangement rather than simply offering charity. But Sarah also had concerns about independence and self-reliance. She had worked hard to maintain her family's dignity during their financial struggles, and she worried about becoming too dependent on Marcus's generosity. What if the arrangement didn't work out? What if Marcus changed his mind, or his expectations became unreasonable? There was also the question of Marcus's motivations. Sarah believed he was sincere about wanting to learn from her family, but she wondered whether a wealthy, successful man would really be satisfied with the day-to-day realities of living near a busy household with 5 children. On Wednesday evening, Sarah called Marcus to arrange another meeting. This time, she wanted to visit the ranch property so she and the children could see where they would potentially be living and working. Marcus was delighted by the request and invited the family to come for dinner and a tour. "I should warn you," he said, "I'm not much of a cook." "I was planning to order pizza, Mr. Wellington," Sarah said with a laugh. "After the week we've had, pizza sounds perfect." The following Saturday, the Mitchell family piled into their old minivan and drove to Marcus's ranch. As they turned into the long driveway, all 5 children pressed their faces to the windows, taking in the expansive views of rolling pastures, grazing cattle, and well-maintained outbuildings. The main ranch house was impressive but not intimidating. Built of local stone and timber, it felt substantial and welcoming rather than ostentatious. Marcus met them on the front porch, and Sarah noticed that he seemed more relaxed and casual than he had been during their previous meetings. "Welcome to Wellington Ranch," Marcus said. "Are you ready for the grand tour?" For the next hour, Marcus showed the family around the property. They visited the horse stables, where Emma was thrilled to meet a gentle mare named Sunshine. They toured the cattle facilities, where Jake asked detailed questions about feeding schedules and veterinary care. They explored the workshop areas, where the twins were fascinated by the variety of tools and equipment used for ranch maintenance. The guest house where the Mitchell family would live exceeded Sarah's expectations. It was spacious, comfortable, and well-maintained, with large windows that looked out over the pastures. Each child would have their own bedroom for the first time in years, and there was a living area large enough for their family activities and homework time. "The house has been sitting empty since my sister moved to Denver 5 years ago," Marcus explained. "I've kept it maintained, but it needs a family to make it feel like a home again." Tommy was most excited about the big backyard behind the guest house. "Mama, we could have our movie nights out here, and there's room for a really big garden." During their pizza dinner in Marcus's main house, the conversation flowed more naturally than Sarah had expected. Marcus asked thoughtful questions about the children's interests and schooling, and he shared stories about his own childhood on the ranch. Sarah began to see a different side of Marcus, one that was genuinely curious about other people rather than focused solely on business matters. "Mr. Wellington," Emma said during dinner, "if we came to live here, would you teach me to ride horses?" "I'd be happy to teach you to ride," Marcus said, "but I'd also want you to learn about horse care, stable management, and the responsibilities that go with owning animals." "Riding is just one part of horsemanship." Emma nodded seriously. "I want to learn everything." Jake had been thinking about the ranch's operations throughout the tour. "Mr. Wellington, I noticed you have some pasture areas that aren't being used right now. Would there be any possibility of using some of that space for a larger rabbit operation, or maybe for raising other small animals?" Marcus looked impressed by Jake's entrepreneurial thinking. What kind of expansion are you considering? Well, I've been reading about raising chickens for eggs, and also about goat farming. If I could start small and reinvest the profits, I might be able to build something that could help pay for my college education someday. Sarah felt a surge of pride as she listened to a 10-year-old son discuss his business plans with Marcus. David would have been so proud to see Jake thinking ahead about his future with such maturity and ambition. Jake, I think those are excellent ideas, Marcus said. I'd be interested in learning about small-scale farming operations myself. Maybe we could research those projects together. The twins wanted to know about the school bus situation and whether they would be able to maintain their friendships with classmates. Marcus assured them that several other ranch families in the area had children who rode the same bus route, and that their current friends would always be welcome to visit. Tommy's main concern was whether he could bring his favorite stuffed animals, and whether his bed would fit in the new bedroom. Sarah was touched by Marcus's patient attention to Tommy's questions, treating the 5-year-old's concerns with the same seriousness he had shown for Jake's business plans. As the evening wound down, Marcus asked Sarah if they could talk privately while the children explored the guest house one more time. They sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sunset over the pastures. Mrs. Mitchell, I want to be completely honest with you about my expectations for this arrangement, Marcus said. I'm not looking for an employee who happens to live on my property. I'm hoping for something more like a partnership where we both contribute our strengths to make life better for everyone involved.
Sarah appreciated his directness. What would that look like on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I'm hoping you could help me organize and manage the household operations that I've been neglecting for years.
I eat too many frozen dinners, my house is clean but not really comfortable, and I haven't entertained guests or celebrated holidays properly since my divorce. I think you could help me create a more welcoming home environment. Marcus paused, looking out over the ranch. In return, I can provide stability and opportunities for your family, and I can teach the children skills that might serve them well in the future. Emma could become an accomplished horsewoman. Jake could develop his agricultural interests. All of the kids could learn about business, responsibility, and rural life. Sarah had been thinking about similar possibilities. The children would need to maintain their school performance and continue their activities in town, and we would need to maintain our independence as a family, even while living on your property. Absolutely, Marcus agreed. I'm not trying to replace anyone's father or take over your family's decision-making. I'm hoping to become something like a mentor and friend to the children and a business partner to you. Sarah felt comfortable with Marcus's approach, but she had one more important question. Mr. Wellington, what happens if this arrangement doesn't work out? What if you decide you don't like having a family living so close? Or what if we find that we're not compatible as working partners? Marcus had clearly thought about this possibility. If the arrangement doesn't work for any reason, I'll give you 6 months' notice and help you find suitable housing elsewhere. I won't leave you and the children without options. That level of security was more than Sarah had dared to hope for. And what about the original debt, the back rent that I owe? As far as I'm concerned, that debt would be forgiven as part of our new arrangement. We'd be starting fresh. Sarah felt relief wash over her. For months, the weight of that debt had been a constant source of anxiety. The possibility of starting over without that financial burden felt like a tremendous gift. On the drive home, the children were full of excitement and chatter about the possibilities of ranch life. Sarah listened to their enthusiasm while thinking through the practical details of making such a significant move. That night, after the children were asleep, Sarah sat at her kitchen table and made a list of pros and cons for Marcus's proposal. The advantages clearly outweighed the potential drawbacks, but Sarah wanted to be certain she was making the right decision for her family's future. The next morning, Sarah called Marcus with her decision. Mr. Wellington, the children and I have talked it over, and we'd like to accept your offer. When would you want us to start? Marcus sounded genuinely pleased. That's wonderful news, Mrs. Cathcart. Mitchell, why don't we plan for you to move in 2 weeks? That will give you time to finish out your commitment at the diner and give the children time to say goodbye to their friends. We can spend the first week getting everyone settled, and then we'll start developing our working routines. There's one thing I'd like to ask, Sarah said. Since we're going to be working and living in such close partnership, would it be all right if you called me Sarah? And could the children call you Marcus instead of Mr. Wellington? It might help everyone feel more comfortable with the new arrangements. I'd like that very much, Sarah, Marcus said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Over the next 2 weeks, the Mitchell family prepared for their move to Wellington Ranch. Sarah gave her notice at the diner, where her co-workers threw a farewell party and promised to stay in touch. The children said goodbye to friends and teachers with promises to maintain their friendships and school activities. Sarah also spent time shopping for items that would be needed for their new lifestyle, using the advance that Marcus had offered to cover moving expenses. The children needed work clothes suitable for ranch activities, and Sarah wanted to prepare special meals for their first week in the new house. Emma checked out every book about horses that the library owned, determined to be as knowledgeable as possible before her first riding lesson. Jake researched chicken breeds and goat farming techniques, preparing detailed business plans for his expanded agricultural operations. The twins practiced their choir songs and prepared a special performance to thank Marcus for welcoming their family. Tommy packed his stuffed animals carefully along with his art supplies for making thank you pictures. On moving day, several neighbors and friends from town came to help the Mitchell family pack and transport their belongings. Marcus arrived with a large truck and several ranch hands to assist with the heavier items. Sarah was touched by how many people came to wish their family well and to meet Marcus, who seemed genuinely interested in getting to know the Mitchell family's community connections. As they loaded the last boxes into the truck, Sarah took one final look at the little house on Maple Creek Road. It had been home during some of the most difficult months of their lives, but it had also been the place where they had learned to work together as a family and to face challenges with courage and determination. Emma stood beside her mother, following her gaze. "Are you sad to leave, Mama?" Sarah considered the question. "I'm grateful for our time here, because it taught us how strong we could be together, but I'm excited about what's ahead of us." Tommy tugged on Sarah's hand. "Is Marcus going to be part of our family now?" Sarah knelt down to Tommy's level. "Marcus is going to be our friend and partner, sweetie. He's going to help us, and we're going to help him. We'll still be the same family we've always been, but now we'll have someone else who cares about us too." As the convoy of vehicles headed toward Wellington Ranch, Sarah felt a combination of nervousness and anticipation. The next chapter of their lives was about to begin, and for the first time since David's death, Sarah felt hopeful that the future held possibilities she hadn't even imagined. 6 months after the Mitchell family moved to Wellington Ranch, Sarah stood in the kitchen of the main house preparing Sunday dinner for what had become their weekly family gathering. The arrangement that had started as a business partnership had evolved into something none of them had anticipated, a chosen family that brought out the best in everyone involved. The transition hadn't been without challenges. During the first month, there had been moments when Sarah worried that they had made a mistake. Marcus was used to quiet solitude, and suddenly his orderly ranch was filled with the sounds of children playing, practicing music, and working on school projects. The children had to adjust to rural life, with its early morning chores and greater distances from their town friends. But gradually, they had all found their rhythm. Marcus discovered that he enjoyed the energy and purpose that came with being part of an active household. The children thrived with the additional space, opportunities, and stability that ranch life provided. Sarah found fulfillment in creating a warm home environment that benefited not just her own family, but Marcus as well. Emma had become an accomplished horsewoman under Marcus's patient instruction. She rode with confidence and skill, and had taken over much of the daily care for the horses. More importantly, she had developed a deep understanding of animal behavior and ranch management that impressed everyone who met her. Her school grades remained excellent, and she had started tutoring younger students in math and science. Jake's agricultural ventures had exceeded everyone's expectations. His rabbit operation now generated steady income, and he had successfully added chicken farming to his enterprises. Under Marcus's guidance, Jake had learned about feed costs, breeding schedules, and market planning. He maintained detailed records of his expenses and profits, and had already saved several $100s toward his future college education. His business success had also boosted his confidence in other areas, and he had become a leader among his classmates. The twins, Lucy and Lily, had blossomed in their new environment. They continued their participation in the school choir, but they had also discovered talents for gardening and cooking. Working alongside Sarah, they had expanded the family's vegetable garden into a productive operation that supplied fresh produce for both households. Their school choir director had been so impressed with their improved confidence and performance that she had chosen them for special solos in the spring concert. Tommy had adapted to ranch life with the resilience of childhood. His nightmares about moving had stopped after the first month, and he now considered Wellington Ranch his true home. He had learned to collect eggs from Jake's chickens, help with simple ranch chores, and ride a gentle pony that Marcus had acquired specifically for Tommy's use. His drawings had evolved from simple stick figures to detailed pictures of ranch animals and family activities. For Sarah, the changes had been profound. Managing the household operations for both the guest house and the main house had given her a sense of purpose and accomplishment that she hadn't experienced since David's death. She had discovered talents for organizing, planning, and creating comfortable living spaces that she had never fully developed during her years of just getting by financially. More significantly, Sarah had found herself part of an adult friendship that she valued deeply. Her working partnership with Marcus had grown into a relationship built on mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine affection. They made decisions together about ranch operations, family activities, and long-term planning. Sarah felt like her opinions were valued and her contributions were essential. Marcus's transformation had been equally dramatic. The lonely, business-focused man who had driven up to collect a debt had become someone who looked forward to family dinners, helped with homework, and celebrated the children's achievements. He had learned to bake cookies with the twins, discuss literature with Emma, and support Jake's entrepreneurial dreams. Most importantly, he had learned that success measured in relationships and shared experiences was more satisfying than success measured only in financial terms. The weekly Sunday dinners had become a cherished tradition that brought together the extended ranch family, which now included several neighboring families and ranch employees who had become friends. These gatherings featured the fresh produce from the children's gardens, meat from the ranch's cattle operation, and home-baked goods that had become Sarah's specialty. On this particular Sunday, the dining room of the main house was decorated with wildflowers that the twins had gathered from the pastures. The table was set for 12 people, including Marcus's sister Patricia and her family, who were visiting from Denver. Patricia had been skeptical about Marcus's arrangement with the Mitchell family, but this weekend visit had convinced her that her brother had found something special. "Marcus, I have to admit that I was worried about this situation when you first told me about it," Patricia said during dinner. "But seeing how happy you are and how well these children are thriving, I understand why you made the choices you did." Emma looked up from her conversation with Patricia's teenage daughter. "Marcus has taught us so much about ranching and business, but we've taught him about family dinners and game nights. And about making Christmas cookies that actually taste good," Marcus added with a laugh. "My previous attempts were not successful." Jake had been discussing his agricultural projects with Patricia's husband, an accountant who was impressed by the young boy's business planning. "Jake, have you considered applying for a youth entrepreneurship program? I think you'd be a strong candidate for some of the state competitions." "Marcus and I have been talking about that," Jake said. "We want to research which programs would be the best fit for my interests." Sarah noticed how naturally Jake included Marcus in his future planning. The relationship between Marcus and the children had developed organically, without anyone trying to force Marcus into a parental role. Instead, he had become something like a beloved uncle or mentor, someone who cared deeply about their success but respected Sarah's position as their mother. After dinner, the group gathered in the living room for music and games. The twins performed the songs they had been practicing for their spring concert, with Emma accompanying them on a guitar that Marcus had surprised her with for Christmas. Tommy showed off his latest drawings, including a detailed picture of the ranch that he planned to enter in a local art contest. As the evening wound down and the visitors prepared to return to town, Patricia pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. "Sarah, I need to tell you something," Patricia said. "I haven't seen my brother this happy and fulfilled since we were children. Whatever you and your family have brought to his life, it's been transformative." Sarah appreciated Patricia's words, but she wanted to be clear about the mutual nature of the arrangement. "Marcus has been equally transformative for us. My children have opportunities and stability that I never could have provided on my own. And I've found work that gives me a sense of purpose and accomplishment." "It's more than just work, though, isn't it?" Patricia asked perceptively. Sarah considered her answer carefully. Over the past 6 months, her relationship with Marcus had deepened beyond a working partnership. They had become close friends who supported each other through challenges and celebrated each other's successes. There were moments when Sarah wondered if their relationship might develop into something more romantic. But she was content to let that possibility evolve naturally, without forcing anything. "Marcus has become one of my dearest friends," Sarah said honestly. "Whatever our relationship develops into over time, I know that he will always be an important part of our family's life." Later that evening, after the children were settled in the guest house for the night, Sarah and Marcus sat on the porch of the main house, reviewing the day and planning for the week ahead. This had become another cherished routine, these quiet conversations that helped them stay connected to each other's thoughts and feelings. "I got a letter from my lawyer this week," Marcus said. He's finally finished all the paperwork to formally change the rental agreement for the guest house. You and the children now have permanent residency rights that can't be revoked, regardless of what happens to our working arrangement. Sarah was touched by Marcus's effort to provide her family with security. That's very generous of you, but I hope it won't be necessary. I can't imagine wanting to live anywhere else. I can't imagine wanting you to live anywhere else either, Marcus said. But I wanted you to have the legal protections in case anything ever happens to me, or in case circumstances change in ways we can't predict. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch and watching stars appear in the darkening sky. Sarah reflected on how much their lives had changed since that afternoon when Marcus had first driven up to the little house on Maple Creek Road. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" Sarah said. "Do you ever regret the decision to offer us this opportunity instead of simply collecting the rent money?" Marcus smiled. "That's the easiest question anyone has ever asked me. Not for a single moment have I regretted that decision. It was the best business deal I've ever made, except it wasn't really about business at all. What was it about? It was about recognizing that the most valuable things in life can't be measured in dollars. Your family taught me that success means having people to share your achievements with, people who care about your well-being, people who make ordinary days feel special." Sarah felt her heart warm at Marcus's words. "You've taught us valuable lessons too. You've shown the children that hard work and education can create opportunities, that adults can be trusted to keep their promises, and that families can be formed in many different ways." Over the following months, life at Wellington Ranch continued to evolve and flourish. Emma's writing skills advanced to the point where she began competing in local youth competitions, with Marcus traveling to events as her coach and biggest supporter. Jake's agricultural enterprises expanded to include a small vegetable stand at the local farmers market, where his business acumen and polite customer service made him a favorite among customers. The twins developed their musical talents further, learning to play piano and participating in regional choir festivals. Their confidence and performance skills improved dramatically, and their music teacher recommended them for advanced training programs. Tommy continued to grow and thrive, his artistic abilities developing alongside his ranching skills. He learned to read with Emma's patient tutoring, excelled in kindergarten, and formed friendships with children from other ranch families. Sarah's role expanded beyond household management to include helping Marcus with ranch business operations. Her organizational skills and attention to detail proved valuable in managing schedules, coordinating with suppliers, and maintaining records. She also discovered a talent for hospitality, organizing events and gatherings that brought the ranch community together. As the first anniversary of their arrival at Wellington Ranch approached, Sarah and Marcus began planning a celebration that would acknowledge how much their lives had changed and how grateful they were for the unexpected path that had brought them together. The celebration took place on a warm Saturday evening in late spring, with the entire ranch community gathered for a barbecue and dance. The children performed a special concert featuring music they had learned throughout the year, and Jake gave a presentation about his agricultural projects that impressed all the adults present. During the evening, Marcus stood up to address the gathering. "A year ago, I drove down a dusty road thinking I was going to collect a debt. Instead, I found something much more valuable than money. I found a family that taught me what home really means." He looked towards Sarah and the children. "Sarah, Emma, Jake, Lucy, Lily, and Tommy, you've given me gifts that I didn't even know I needed. You've shown me that the best kind of success is the kind you share with people you love." Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she listened to Marcus's words. The journey from that first difficult conversation on the porch of the little rental house to this moment of celebration had been filled with challenges, growth, and discoveries none of them had anticipated. As the evening continued with music and dancing under the stars, Sarah watched her children laughing and playing with friends, confident and happy in their ranch home. She saw Marcus teaching Tommy how to do a simple dance step and noticed Emma explaining horse care techniques to younger children who looked up to her with admiration. This was not the life Sarah had planned when she married David, or the future she had imagined when she found herself widowed with 5 children to support, but it was a good life, filled with love, purpose, and possibilities that continued to unfold with each passing day. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with endings rather than beginnings. Marcus's routine debt collection had ended his old life of solitary success, and Sarah's financial crisis had ended her struggle to manage alone. In their place, both had found something neither had been looking for: a chosen family built on mutual respect, shared values, and the understanding that the greatest wealth lies not in what you own, but in who you love and who loves you in return. As Sarah tucked Tommy into bed that night, he asked his usual question. "Mama, are we going to live here forever?" For the first time since they had moved to the ranch, Sarah answered with complete confidence. As long as Marcus wants us here, and as long as we're happy here, this will be our home. Good, Tommy said sleepily. I like our family the way it is now. Sarah kissed her youngest child good night and realized that she completely agreed. Their family had grown in ways none of them had expected, but it had grown in exactly the right ways. The debt that had threatened to destroy them had become the foundation for something far more valuable than money, a future filled with love, opportunity, and the kind of security that comes not from bank accounts, but from knowing that you belong somewhere and that your presence makes other people's lives better too.